Good evening. I'm Donna Ward, the Chair of Voter Services for the League of Women Voters of the Montclair area. And with the Montclair NAACP, we're very happy to host tonight the first of a few planned upcoming public information sharing meetings on the school bond referendum that's going to be on the November ballot. We are going to be recording this session and posting it on our league website for subsequent viewing. And that website is lwvmontclairarea.org. Montclair voters are being asked to vote yes or no on a major $188 million bond issuance to fund major school infrastructure improvements. This will affect all the schools in town and take 6 to 7 years to accomplish. There will be some state aid. It's expected to cover 31% of the plan's overall cost through annual debt service payments, thereby providing some significant tax relief for Montclair property owners. However, this plan will require an increase in local property taxes over the life of the bonds. With us tonight is a panel from the Montclair Board of Education to help explain this bond proposal and answer questions from Montclair voters so we can make an informed decision. So I'm very pleased tonight to be joined by Dr. Jonathan Pons, the Superintendent of Montclair Schools, Board of Education President Latifa Jana, Vice President Priscilla Church, Finance and Facilities Chair Eric Schertzer, and David Cantor, the new Executive Director of Communications and Community Engagement for this. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for taking time tonight to join us to help explain the ins and outs of the bond proposal for us. A note to the audience, we're going to start with questions that we received in advance from people who registered for this forum, but as our panelists speak, feel free to put in questions in the Q&A function, and we'll be looking for them, and we can try and integrate those questions into our evening tonight, which we hope to be about an hour. So I'd like to first ask or invite Ms. Latifa Jana to make some opening remarks about the school bond proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters. This, as was stated, the first of a few forums that we will be giving, including 2 town halls, to really go over our community investment bond referendum plan to try to answer your questions in order to have you make an informed decision when it's time for you to vote in November. Montclair's aging school buildings need critical and long delayed repairs to meet health and safety requirements, building code regulations, and especially educational standards. For nearly a year, the school board's Finance and Facilities Committee worked with architects and met with the Montclair community in designing a $188 million plan for essential improvements to meet the district's infrastructure. So to go into that, I'm going to start our discussion with our Facilities and Finance Chairman, Mr. Eric Schertzer.
Thank you very much, President Jana and Ms. Ward and the NAACP, I believe, also for hosting this this forum tonight. My role here is to do a little bit of history and then introduce Dr. Pons, and who will give a more overview of what we're attempting to do. I got on the board about a year and a half ago, and just after the time that we all remember was a difficult period of time, both in terms of COVID and in whether the schools should be open or not. And clearly one of the main issues that arose during that time was the, I see somebody texting me that the League of Women Voters site is giving a, is not letting people in or something. So maybe your tech people should look into that. But in any event, we began looking at how we could improve the ventilation in all of our classrooms. It was certainly something that needed to be addressed for a long time, but the issue of COVID brought it to the forefront in an incredibly important way, and made it clear to those of us on the committee that, which included Ms. Church and my other board member, Monk Yang, that we needed to address this issue. We began in the fall and the summer of 2021 to look into what we could do, and initiated a plan through federal funding to put in ventilation in 66 classrooms. It cost $1.7 million, and we did that with federal funding that we had. These were the classrooms with almost nothing in the way of ventilation, and we installed that ventilation in the 6 months between the summer and the beginning of the new year. That $1.7 million project came in under budget by about $143,000, so it was 8% under budget. But at the same time, we were presenting proposals at that point to the Board of School Estimate. We put a proposal into them to make a lot of the additional changes. The Board of School Estimate, which was our funding source at the time, did not act on our proposal in October and November of last year. And then the voters on November 8th, November election day last year, put in an elected board, changed the process completely, and made it so that the Board of School Estimate was eliminated, and any capital funding that the district needed, we needed to come to the voters for approval. We continued, that was a frustrating time because we saw that the work that we had wanted to begin perhaps last summer, we couldn't begin because we had to start the process all over again to get approval from the state and put a proposal together for the voters. All during the winter and the beginning of the spring last year, the superintendent, the Buildings and Grounds Department, principals, head custodians did walkthroughs in all of the schools in the district, came up with a list of projects that needed to be done that not only included ventilation, although ventilation clearly is a major part of this whole bond issue, but also included a whole bunch of work that hadn't been done over a long period of time. Aging boilers, roofs that were failing, classrooms that had not been upgraded in decades, scores of years. And that total list of proposals came back to our committee. We reviewed them diligently, school by school, because frankly, there were proposals, there were over $300 million of proposals, and we obviously couldn't afford that. We whittled that down to the proposals that we thought were the most important, both to improve the facilities and to improve the educational atmosphere for all our students. We met during that period of time. This is last March, April, May, with the MEA, the teachers union, a couple of times, with CPAC, with the NAACP, with both clergy associations, with the MFEE, to get their input as we were developing the proposal. And we decided, we came up with it's actually 187, almost 188 million, not quite, proposal that the board voted on back in May 5th. And we needed to do it at that time because we needed to give the Department of Education, they were supposedly going to give us a response. They need to approve all of the applications that we put in. We put in 25 applications. Some schools had 2, some schools had 3. It depended on the details of the work. And I know that this proposal is very confusing. We got back a response from the State Department of Education as only on September 6th, less than a month ago, and well delayed from the date of August 5th when we were supposed to get it back, which has put this process on a very rough time frame, because we had to submit the actual language of the bond to the county, Essex County, by I think it was the 11th of September. So we had very little leeway here. We were pleased, however, to see that the state allocated over 31% of the debt service costs over the life of this bond. And that was slightly better than we had anticipated, and slightly better than what we had predicted when we voted on the bond back in May. Two things I want to say in general before, that's sort of the history before I introduce Dr. Pons. One is that the language of the bond, what you'll see on the ballot, is very detailed and somewhat confusing. And at first, when myself and other members of the board read it and said, this is not the way to explain what we're doing, we were told by our bond counsel that this language is required. This is state language. The state requires us to list things in a certain manner, in a certain form, and we have no, we must comply with that. So that's some of the commentary I've seen speaks to the confusing nature of that. And unfortunately, that was not something that we had the option of changing or correcting. I want to say one other thing as a general frame. We've also received a number of questions about the environmental considerations that went into this. And the board, for a couple of years prior to my being on the board, but has come up with an ESIP plan, which required energy savings investment program, I think, which required, not required, but which did energy audits in every single school in the district. Those reports are on our district website, and we've made over $10 million, I believe, of changes and upgrades and lighting and other things to address environmental issues. And this bond does a bunch more. So with that, I've taken a lot of time on the history. I want to turn it over to Dr. Pons for an overview of what we're trying to do here.
Well, I want to thank the League of Women Voters and also the NAACP for having us here tonight. And I want to thank everybody for willing to listen to us. I'm going to give a brief overview of everything that's going on and get ready for the questions, because really the questions are what people want to get answered here. So what I'll say is that we went on this trek years ago when we found out that we need to do something different. COVID was a catalyst, absolute catalyst. But then as we delved deeper into our facilities, we saw it was an urgent need. Years ago, the staircase fell, but there was an urgent need for us to move forward. And so with the help of the committee, that led us, the committee, Facility and Finance Committee, with Ms. Church and Mr. Scherzer, really led us down this road, with me pushing, led us down this road to go through all of our buildings. We walked the buildings at evening time with principals, head custodians, director of buildings and grounds, and really dug out everything we needed to do. And went to the painstaking meetings, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week, to discuss what we can and what we can't do. We talked to people, we talked to different groups around us about what would you like to see, and we got great information from parents, parent groups, organizations, even from our own personnel. And so we put this together, and we're asking the community to invest in the schools, to invest in our community. Research is very clear. When you invest in your schools, you do a lot for morale. You do a lot for academics. Not mistaken, I think about 3 or 4% of your academic, your scores go up based on facilities. We know when facilities are bad, impact scores, and typically in places where you don't want them to, your most vulnerable populations feel that impact. Also, property value goes up. So this is an investment in our children, in our community. And We went through a summer of pushing the state, asking the state to expedite things, and they did. So I'm excited to be here, but I can tell you, it was a leadership that was all around us. Myself, the Facility and Finance Committee, Mr. Scherzer, Ms. Church. We met in that hot office, that hot conference room. We were sweating in there for weeks on end to get this information done. Went through a thick packet of all these facility pieces, things I didn't understand at the time, types of boilers, all name it. You name it, we went through it. From technology to security, everything, classrooms, classroom furniture, everything. Finding out that our baseball field, that some of our teams can't play games when it rains sometimes. It rains them out. Those kind of pieces we went through to get to this point. And we're excited the state's going to give us, I believe, $58 million, which is 31%. So I'm here to answer questions the best we can, but I will say our two experts, Will Ross and Ms. Andrea Kahn, will be tomorrow night at Town Hall. If you want to get some really in-depth questions that we can answer tonight, they'll be here to help us. This is a community investment. I am proud to be a part of this group. I'm proud to be a part of the team here, and I'll do everything I can to move us forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. That was very helpful, to hear the background, as well as, currently, why this bond is needed now. I mean, I've read that there's 25 projects in the proposal, ranging from improved ventilation, air conditioning in all schools, boiler and roof replacements, upgraded electrical service, refashioned educational spaces like STEM labs, music rooms, culinary arts classrooms, gymnasiums, and auditoriums. How did the board prioritize what work was needed, meaning the balance between those critical things that were needed to upgrade the actual infrastructure for safety and code related issues versus the more long-term, nice to have, but perhaps not, mission critical projects? I see Ms. Church raising your hand. Go ahead.
I really wanted to answer this question, at least to start off the discussion with the rest of the panel. Dr. Pons started off, and Mr. Scherzer had explained that there were extensive walkthroughs that were done in the building. Certainly we knew right off the bat that, let me put it this way, the binder that was done, there was $300 million worth of ideas in that book. Obviously, the paramount was the ventilation in the buildings, to the point where the voters are going to find out that $105 million of this bond is dedicated to that type of work, which is the HVAC equipment, the roofing, the boilers, all the energy efficiency that goes with that. But besides that, as we were looking at it, a lot of ideas came to the surface because these walkthroughs were really very beneficial. We talked about the keying of doors and the unification for security. We talked about technology and how, in a lot of ways, and we all had children, for the most part, that were in the district. Our classrooms have not moved forward from the point that, I know in my example, my daughter went to school there in the 1990s, so that we felt that we were far behind as far as the technical opportunities that we can offer children. Not that we don't have one-on-one devices, of course we do, and that's important to remember. The district has always moved forward in, with the best thoughts for supporting education. But for the fact that we don't have 21st century tools in teachers' hands. So we felt that although it's important to focus on all the structural needs of our 100-year-old buildings, because COVID, as it's been said many times before me right now, had brought it to light that we need to upgrade these buildings to go beyond what we were doing during COVID, to at least open the buildings up. We need to bring the boilers that are out of warranty, the roofs that are outdated and causing difficulties. We need to fix that. But we also have a very, very important obligation to look at the classrooms. Let's bring these classrooms up and give the students the 21st century opportunity that they deserve, the 21st century opportunity that's going to prepare them for their futures. So that being able to put interactive whiteboards into certain classrooms where teachers can actually bring the internet forward is an important option. You parents that are hearing this will know that STEM and STEAM are now big focal points in the area of science, which is great. But if we don't give our teachers the support tools that they need, such as the maker workstations where they can actually do the hands-on work, then we're not giving them the tools that they can extend it to the capacity that needs to be extended. Somebody mentioned home ec rooms. It is time for us to start upgrading things beyond what we remember. We need to have culinary arts studios. We need to have opportunities, say, in the industrial arts area where we may offer auto mechanics. We need to bring that into the CAD systems that we all know when we go to get our cars repaired. It's not just lifting up the hood anymore. It's about the computer diagnostics and so on. We need to prepare every child for whatever footprint they want to leave in their future, which buildings with the way they are now are not prepared to do that. I do want to say, and I think it's important to say, Montclair does have an excellent school system, but that is coming from the motivation and the dedication of our staff. We need to put the classrooms in place that are going to support their work so that they can move their work forward and bring the kids to the type of future that they're going to have. And I think that that's really an important thing here. That's something that this community has not done to date. And that's something that we need to keep in mind. Right down to basics of there are certain buildings as we get through these conversations that we just need to refresh the classrooms, that we need to paint them. We need to put new floors. We need to put ceilings in. We need to put cabinetry in so that when kids walk in, they have a bright environment that speaks of the opportunity that's in front of them. The teachers have an environment that puts the tools in their hands. I think all of these things are important. This is a very well-rounded plan, and this is what our thinking was as we were sorting through that binder and then coming up with a plan that we felt we can present to the community, because we're taxpayers as well, something that we can afford, something that's going to benefit our students, something that's going to support the goals that we have in this community for education. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Church. Moving on now to more after hearing some of that, of the vision of the proposal and how it balances both the capital infrastructure and critical infrastructure needs with this long-term vision of improving the learning environment in the classrooms. But at the end of the day, it is going to result in an increase in property taxes. What I've read is that the average annual, so we need to talk about that, make sure that the voters understand that the average, I've read that the average annual tax impact over the 24-year course of repayments is expected to be $732, beginning with an expected $323 average impact per household in 2023. That's based on roughly a $629,000 home. How is that estimate derived, and how can, and more importantly, how can a homeowner find out what their estimated actual assessment might be with this bond proposal? Mr. Schertzen.
As Dr. Pond said, the real experts in putting this together will be at the town hall tomorrow night, but I can begin to take a crack at it. First of all, if you're asking what your assessed value of your house is, it should be on your tax bill. You can certainly find that out by calling City Hall. We took the number that you gave, almost $629,000, is what has been established as the average home value in Montclair, and obviously there's a wide range. In the first year, I believe that the tax, we can't give absolute specific numbers yet for a couple of reasons. One is the bonds will not actually be sold until A, the voters approve this, hopefully approve this in November, and B, there's other work that needs to be done beforehand. So we're probably talking about bonds that are going to be sold in January or February of next year. Nobody has a crystal ball exactly what interest rates will be at the time. So our financial consultants have done, have given us their best estimate, which is almost the numbers that you mentioned. It'll be slightly less in the first couple of years. By the charts we've seen, somewhere around $258. But that also depends on the interest rate at the time, and it also depends on how much money we take. We've decided, with consideration of the taxpayers, of which all three of us on the board are senior citizen, happen to be senior citizen taxpayers on our work for the Board of Education is not work, it's volunteer. And we're all on relatively fixed incomes. We have the same burden ourselves. But how much money gets taken for the first 2 years, the second 2 years, and the third 2 years is not absolutely decided yet. We've come up with our best estimates, but it's going to take a bunch of work by our architects and a construction manager, whom we are going to hire as soon as we have the funds, the resources to do that, to create a master plan that will tell us exactly how much money we're going to take for the first 2 years. So the numbers we have now are estimates based on, I'll tell you what they're based on. They're based on $70,000 in the first 2-year tranche, $60,000 in the second 2-year tranche, and the remainder, 57 some odd $1,000. I'm sorry, talking thousands. I mean millions across the board in the third tranche. But those are our best that's our best estimate at this time. Before the bonds are sold, we will have a definite plan, and all these numbers will become more obvious. But unfortunately, that's the best we can do at the current time.
Understood. Ms. Church, and then Mr. Cantor.
Okay. Please excuse me, Eric and I have been tag teaming each other all summer long with our presentations, so I just want to step in for a second. One of the things we have done that is a definite, we made this decision to go into 3 tranches, specifically because, again, as Eric said, we happen to be on a fixed income. We know that there's a lot of other stressors where families are concerned, whether they're senior citizens or they're raising families, that they may have kids in school, but they're still, raising families and trying to put food on the table. There's a whole lot of stressors on us. So one decision we did make, we will split this up into the 3 tranches so that we can minimize the tax burden over a period of time. What that means is, as Eric had said, if we take $60 million in the first tranche to kick this off and get the project started, we might be working on the projects that are under that umbrella of the $60 million for 2 or 3 years. So if the figure is $350 in the first tranche, that it's going to cost the average home of $629,000, that will be the increase at that moment. And there will be no other increases for the duration of that part of the project. When we go for the second tranche, the additional monies, depending on how much we take, it could increase our taxes by another $250. And then the third tranche down around the 6th or the 7th year when we're finalizing the project. So one of the things that I think is really important, we are trying to do our due diligence. We are conscious of the taxpayers and all the burdens. And we felt that the 3 tranches was a more responsible approach to handling the money. Besides the fact we did not want to take all the money out at once, we feel that it was more prudent for us to take it out as we need it. We can get better interest rates at that time, and everybody knows that can go one way or the other, but we're trying to be the most responsible that we can. But I want to leave you with that thought, 3 tranches so that we can take this, the taxpayer can take this in smaller bites.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And just to follow up on the financial front, I've read that about 15 million of the proposal was not eligible for the state aid. Is that covered by this bond proposal, or is that an incremental that would have to be found somewhere? No, that's the 50, even though the state is not covering that portion of it, that will be covered in this bond proposal. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. Construction will begin.
Donna, can I just make one clarification?
I'm sorry, David, you were going to say yes.
Yeah, just to be clear, we're used to talking about tranches, but you don't hear that word on the street that often. To be clear, it doesn't come up at parties that often. Just to be absolutely clear, we're going to be issuing 3 bonds for the reasons that Priscilla mentioned, one in 2023, one in 2025, and one 2027. Again, we staggered it so that the tax impact upfront would not be as severe. So 3 bonds, those are the tranches. Without getting in, a lot of numbers are flying around. I just want to make a correction about one number because it's on us, which is that the first year that the owner of an averagely valued home in Montclair, which is $629,000, will be looking at a $258 increase. We put out the number 323. I would like to retract that. The number's 258.
Helpful. That's a significant difference. So that's a helpful correction. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, assuming if the bond proposal is approved, this will obviously require major construction work. My understanding is the construction would begin in summer of 2023 and end 5 to 6, 7 years from now. How are the schools going to handle the construction in the meantime? Will there be school closures? I mean, how will that be phased to do all of this work? Who would like to answer that? Dr. Pons?
We're really going to lead into our construction manager and those experts. We're going to hire someone who's done this before in different districts to make sure they can give us the best advice. For us to make it a statement tonight without having an expert's review, what we like to do would be ill-advised.
Thank you.
Can I?
Church.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Schertz.
Yeah, just a second. We don't anticipate any school closures. We don't anticipate anything like that. And I think the best example, which is why I went into it, was the ventilation upgrades that we made in the 66 classrooms. We did that during school. All of that happened while students, not while they were in class. So we worked on the second shift. After students were in the building, we worked on weekends. We're going to make it take advantage as best we can of the summer. That's one of the reasons why we rushed, why we struggled to get this bond on the agenda in November, so that we can do the planning that is required to make the best use of next summertime to do work when students are not in the building.
Great, thank you. Ms. Church, go ahead.
I want to add to all this also, because I have been through this in my career in other districts. First of all, there are things in this plan that will not disrupt school. We'll start with like reappointing of brick and outside type of work on structural work on certain buildings. We're also we're going to be dealing with an expert as far as the building manager is concerned. And even we're going to be looking for construction companies that have done school construction before. And this is what they do. And one of their expertise is in understanding that they can't go in and disrupt education. So it's part of their organizational planning, so that they will triage if this bond is approved and the plans are drawn and everybody gets a chance to look at the plans. That's how they will start to make a decision on, in this time period, we're going to be doing this, this, and that. Because based on what Eric and Dr. Pons had said, we will not be closing school. They don't close schools. What they do is they work to the point to set things up so that if there is something that they have to do that's massive, that would ordinarily interfere with a classroom, that's what they set themselves up for the summer. And I'll use science labs as an example. They would never tear science labs apart in the middle of school, but they would set themselves up or stage it, I should say, to get to the point that in the summer, they can accomplish that goal and get that type of work done. So I guess the answer to this is we're going to be dealing with experts that know how to coordinate this. The other thing too that I think I want to mention at this particular time, this bond will affect all schools. We will not necessarily be working in all schools at the same time. All right, and this is also part of the long range plan. So whereas we may pick there will be priority goals, and they may affect 1, 2, or 3 buildings at one time. But there will be other goals for other buildings that may not come up for a year or two into that second portion of the bond selling and so on and so forth. So that's another reason why I don't want people to get clouded that there's so much work to do, so they're going to have to close school. That's all part of this planning process.
Thank you. Also, that leads to another follow-up question of how was it determined to allocate the funding by school, since all schools in town will be affected? How was that funding determined? Was it by project, or, you know, how did you triage, if you will, that? Who would like to address that?
I'll start, but I really think Ms. Church and Mr. Schroeder should chime in on this. It was by need. It was by need. It was by the need of the school. And you can see some of our schools like Hillside received more. Glenfield received a great deal by need of school, really the need of the school. And it really broke down. I got an interesting fact today from our communication director that I think 7 of our schools were built before over 100 years old. I believe I'm 6 over 100 years old.
9 of 11 were built more than 90 years ago.
But we really went by need, and you can see how old the schools are, but they're still beautiful. Don't get me wrong, they're beautiful schools, but they're older, but by need. And it was really something that I thought was just amazing to hear Ms. Church and Mr. Scherzer say, we're going to do this by the need of the school. And they looked at Glenfield and they said, you know, Glenfield needs a lot of love. And they held tight to that. And they held tight to that and debated about it and held tight to it. Same thing with Hillside. And that was really impressive to see. It wasn't favoritism, it was strictly need.
Thank you. How will the projects be funded in order for school facilities to fully comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act? And what board person are responsible for the compliance? American with Disabilities Act, yeah. Mr. Pons, Dr. Pons.
So we have to be the code. Any new buildings have to be the code. Any new construction has to be the code, which builds in the American Disability Act. And even from our playgrounds, when we build, it's going to fit in that. We're an inclusive school district, and we're going to do it in our construction also. So it's built in. It's what we're going to do, and it's part of being code compliant, but also the right thing to do.
Thank you. And sorry, is there someone on the board who's responsible for American with this kind of compliance or not?
I can answer that. It's really not. It's all of our responsibility. I mean, we're responsible to follow the codes in the state of New Jersey. As board members, it's not about who takes care of special ed, who takes care of general ed. It's about running of the school district. But our architect is our expert person there. He's the one who guided all these questions or pointed things out when we were going through this book, as Dr. Pons was explaining, where he would say, this is required by code for American with Disabilities Act. And those are things that became priorities for us. So he was really a main resource for us in guiding us that way so that we were aware that this is what the code says and this is the baseline of what we had to do.
Thank you. And now I have a couple of questions. It was mentioned that, Mr. Scherzer, that you did get a lot of environmental questions. So we did too. So I'll ask a couple of them. Overall, to what extent were energy savings or switching to renewables a main consideration in your RFP during the bond process? If so, what goals were set out by the board?
Well, as I mentioned before, you know, the board has been taking energy conservation as an issue, as a concern for years. You know, certainly before I began my tenure. To say that we had absolutely specific goals, I think is, you know, we did, I don't think we did, but we were concerned to reduce energy in every way, shape, or form that we could. When we're installing new roofs that will keep heat in the building, when we're installing new boilers that will use less energy than the old ones, you know, that are 80, 90 years old, 60 years old in many cases. All of those things will, you know, will use less energy and will save, you know, will conserve resources. And we are interested, as we continue to develop these proposals, and making sure that we're doing everything we can to, you know, to use less energy and make our buildings more efficient. Unfortunately, they are, as David Cantor pointed out, extremely old, which means that the building envelopes, the walls and whatever are not, you know, the windows are not at the level of, you know, modern buildings, with the exception of, you know, the Bullock School, which was built with a number of those things in mind, which is another example of how the board, you know, long before my time, has been considerate of these issues.
You know, there was a specific question about upgrading the HVAC systems, and my understanding is that upgrading the HVAC systems is really, you know, came to light as a necessity because of our experience with COVID and the need of doing, primarily, not as a means for reducing energy. But this is a question about, do you see that these upgrades, because there's a significant expense associated in the proposal with the HVAC upgrades, will this also contribute to energy and therefore cost savings down the road for the district? Ms. Church.
Absolutely is the answer to that. We're going to be purchasing brand new state-of-the-art equipment that, although a boiler is a boiler, and you know, we've all had them in our aging homes, we're purchasing things that are now being made for 21st century use. One of the things that was our front and center for us was certainly our aging school districts, and the critical and long delayed repairs so that we can meet the health and safety needs. We have buildings that people have to understand. As much as we would like to put green energy types of things into the buildings, we have buildings that, as we've said a couple of times already, are, if they're not 100 years old, they're just about 100 years old. The cost of retrofitting green energy equipment into buildings of this age really made it very cost prohibitive for us to go completely in that direction. So therefore, as I said to you before, working with our architect, who was a great resource for us, he certainly assured us, and this was our expectation, that we would be getting high efficiency equipment that would be put in the building to reduce the utility costs and the usage, to the replacing of the roofs that have exceeded their useful life with new roofs with higher insulation values that improve the building envelope further, aiding in the HVAC efficiency while reducing heating loss. So whatever we could do, we did. I'm going to give you another example. Eric has mentioned this before. We have had this ESIP project for about 2 years now. And in the ESIP project, we have a lot of different things. Even the lighting that we've changed in the building has brought us cost savings and is more energy efficient and moves more towards the green ideology. We have, over the course of our ESIP grant, and maybe Dr. Pons, I'm going to ask if maybe we can do a refresher presentation on that at a board meeting so that people can become refreshed and more familiar with what we're doing. Because that piece alone that we've already are actively engaged in, with all the different things that we're doing, such as the energy conservative measures are include but are not limited to LD lighting upgrades, installation of stratification fans, piping insulation, steam trap replacement, building management control systems, building envelope improvements, permanent electrical load reduction, water conservation measures, and the installation of solar panels. That already is projected to save this district $10 million in our energy costs. So while our envelopes are aging and it's not cost effective for us to just start new with, you know, what's being done today with all the technology that we have, we are bringing in everything that we could possibly bring in to accomplish this goal. We can't put solar panels on all our buildings, just to use an example. The pitches on some of the old historical roofs are not conducive to that type of work. So I want you to know that we have looked at every single area that we know that the community is going to expect from us, things that we wanted to do. And in this particular area, we feel comfortable that we're doing everything that's possible in these in our buildings to bring them up to the level that the community is expecting. And that's really all I have to say.
Thank you. We've just gotten another question, and then if somebody who wants to jump back, I think we've moved it. Thank you. We've covered, I think, the environmental questions that came in. Let's jump back to, we got another property tax question on, you know, once the bond is over, will property tax levels be readjusted back down to where they were before?
Yes.
Okay.
Once we finish paying off the bonds, we've
We
paid
go-
them off. It's like any mortgage you buy, it's going to be a while. This entire plan, given the fact that we're not taking it all at once, will be over a 24-year period of time. But once that's over, it's over. And we paid off the bonds, we paid them off. I want to mention one other thing, because we've talked about ventilation, but certainly one of the environmental consequences of global warming is that it's hotter. We just saw the Philadelphia schools have to close down because temperatures in the buildings were so high. Our buildings are going to be air conditioned after when we install this equipment. And that's another huge advantage to students being able to learn, teachers being able to teach, to being able to use the buildings in a more community way over the summer. There'll be more usable space that we don't, that we're not doing right now. So that's a significant advantage that's going to come from the ventilation improvements that we're going to install.
Thank you for that. Okay. Moving on then from property taxes and environmental, what expectations or assumptions is the district using regarding enrollment trends to ensure that our facilities as part of this project are being right-sized? The last 2 years haven't been predictable in terms of enrollment. We've seen actual enrollment decline in kindergarten. So if we project ahead now to enrollment, what assumptions have been built on in terms of the proposal? Yes, Dr. Pons?
Well, a couple things. On October 17th, we'll have an ESIP project status update. I just got a text from Ms. Hunt. She's actually watching in the audience right now and text me and said October 17th, there'll be a presentation on the ESIP update. So you can hear about that information and what we've done so far to make us energy friendly. The other piece with respect to enrollment, we're seeing a trend upward now. We're seeing a movement upward, and particularly with pre-K, we're seeing close to another 1,000 students will be coming in. So we are seeing a movement upward. We're excited about, right now the bond coming in with our pre-K. We have an exciting time in our district. So we see the trend moving upward right now, and we continue to believe it's going to continue to go that way. People are coming back into the district. We're excited about that, and we're going to continue to move it forward.
And certainly investing in the schools will continue to make our public schools more, attractive for people to continue to move into Montclair. And we certainly have seen no shortage of people wanting to move in to Montclair over the last couple of years. Okay. I don't see any more questions coming in from the audience. So I think maybe we'll just, before we go into some closing remarks, I have to ask, what will happen if this bond is not approved? What are the implications if this bond proposal is not approved? Who would like to talk about that? Dr. Pons first and then Ms. Church. Okay, Dr. Pons first.
So if the bond is not approved, it will simply cost us more later. The problems will still exist. A situation could happen. We'll have to spend more money later. We are really at the table saying this is a dire need for us as our district. So I implore people to think about this with respect to voting for the bond. We're in need. And if we don't, doesn't pass, and we're not telling you how to vote here, those problems that we figured out and investigated back, I believe, in last winter will still exist. Those issues of having boilers that are 60 to almost 90 years old will still be there. When I mentioned this back in 2021, that the bills keep me up at night, they keep me up at night still. So I'm going to do everything I can to give all the information I can to everyone to make a logical decision, a thoughtful decision about this bond.
Thank you. Ms. Church.
Well, I definitely agree with Dr. Pons. I mean, if the bond referendum doesn't pass, our only option is to go back to the drawing table and try to get a pulse on what the community, would accept, because we would have to go back. There's no doubt about it in years to come, because this is not about, if we don't get it, it's okay. Dr. Pons is right. We spend a lot of budget money right now in just the repairs or the reaction to certain situations, particularly with the envelope of the buildings and the structural aspects of the buildings. But I think I want to close with my comment as a 43-year veteran educator. This would be a very sad lost opportunity for this community. My daughter went to these schools in the 1990s. When I started as a board member, all these years later, to walk back on the buildings, I was really very disappointed in how these buildings hadn't changed and how in a lot of cases, they're just older and they look older. Talking to people, because again, we've talked to so many people, we would share stories about, I think Eric was the one that said it to me. He went to these schools and a lot of these rooms and a lot of these facilities were exactly the way that they were when my daughter went in the 90s and the way they are today. I don't think this community really wants that type of stagnation in these buildings that we hold with such pride and we depend on to be part. There are crown jewels in the district. We pride ourselves in the fact that Montclair has an excellent educational reputation. And as I said before, in another comment that I made, we deserve that. Our teachers work really hard, but it is time for us to bring the educational piece up to the 21st century. We need to recognize that we have a lot of divergent needs where the kids are concerned. That's why it's important to attend to the practical arts areas as it is to the academic areas. We need to make sure that our kids are really prepared for the future that they're going to walk into. The technology infrastructure of the building needs to be improved. These are things we have never done before, besides the fact that the buildings are old and they're beginning to show the wear and tear and the strain. But I think if there is a motivating factor for all of us who have had children in the district and want the best and wanted the best for our kids, or people that have them in the district now, we want to bring it up to the educational standard that we expect to be there all the time. We need to support the staff and put the infrastructure in place that they can take the efforts that they put forth every day and they can bring it to another stratosphere for these kids. They have the capacity, they do it every single day, and we need to support that as a school, as a community. So I hope educationally we see the opportunity that we have in front of us to really make a very long overdue and needed paradigm shift in these buildings.
Thank you. Any other, Ms. Jana, would you like to?
Mute.
Unmute.
Okay, I want to support what Dr. Pons and Ms. Church have said. I went to the schools in elementary schools and much of it hasn't changed. And my children went to the schools and much of it hasn't changed. And I think it would be a missed opportunity. And I don't think we can afford to have a missed opportunity. On a personal note, I have a granddaughter who is graduating from Bloomfield High School. and to walk into that high school auditorium and be in their high school auditorium compared to Montclair's high school auditorium, which I am so proud of the district and of what we do in the district, but to see where we have we need to address what we have, we need to upgrade it. We need to know that, yes, it is important to put this money into our schools, and we have an opportunity to do this now. So that if nothing else, I mean, our schools look as good or better than the other schools in our neighboring districts. I feel this is very important, not only as a taxpayer or property owner, but also for our students. I think that's been said a number of times and really needs to be a paramount issue, that this will help our students, and that is our priority. What do we do to help our students achieve?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other remarks? If not, I'm going to invite our co-sponsor from the Montclair NAACP, Lene Jones-Jules, if you'd like to say any final comments before I give the standard league voting logistics, because it's all about the voting now, but I'll do that after Lene speaks. Did you want to say something, Lene?
Oh, thank you. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Mr. Roger Terry of the Montclair NAACP, we thank you for joining tonight and encourage everyone to get out and vote. Also get as much information as you can and share it with your neighbors and friends and the community. This is a very important topic that we all must make well-informed decisions, and there's going to be a lot of other community forums. So we encourage people to get out and get the information you need so that you can make the right decisions and be able to make that vote. There's also time to register to vote still. So please get out and do that and encourage your friends and family to do the same. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you again.
Thank you. And I think that's all the time we have. And then I'm just going to remind the voters, there are 3 ways to vote. You can vote via your mail-in ballot, which you can either mail in or drop off in the ballot box, or the drop box, which is in front of the municipal building on Claremont Avenue. You can vote in person early from October 29th through November 6th at one of the Essex County early voting sites. There's one in Verona, there's one in Bloomfield. Those are the 2 closest to Montclair. And then, of course, you can vote in person on November 8th at our standard polling location. So the referendum will be on your ballot. You'll be voting for your congressional districts as well as the Essex County executive and the referendum. Those are the things that are going to be on your ballot. So please vote. Please encourage your friends and neighbors in Montclair to vote on this very important referendum. And I'd like to very much thank all the panelists for taking the time to be with us tonight. This, as I said, will be recorded and be on the league website. There are 2 other upcoming forums that the Board of Ed is going to have for the public to answer questions. So please make sure that if you still have any remaining, or if you know of people who have any remaining questions, that they attend those forums. So an informed public is what we want to make the best decision on this referendum. Thank you. And sorry, yes, and Eric is reminding me, yes, how could I forget? We will also be voting on school board members. I should know this because the league is sponsoring a candidates forum for those for the Board of Ed candidates on October 19th. So thank you for reminding me to give that plug. Again, thank you all, and thank everyone for participating tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
Bye-bye.